everyone. Today we are joined by the amazing Lauren Foley. How are you today?
Hello, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So just to begin, can you tell our listeners a bit about yourself?
Yes, yeah. So, hi everyone. I'm Lauren. I'm originally from Ireland. I'm doing the whole kind of digital nomad thing right now. So I'm calling from Iceland. So hello. I suppose my kind of my main kind of 9 to 5 thing that I do is I work in feminist digital communication. So I work for one kind of agency, and then we work for like a bunch of kind of NGOs, nonprofits, mostly in the gender sphere. So we do like their social media, newsletters, events, that kind of thing. And I actually just finished my master's in gender studies, so that's very nice. So I'm kind of just taking it easy for the summer. But yeah, I also kind of outside of that, yeah, I just kind of do things like this. Like I try and just kind of communicate, the feminist word through, speaking at events or doing podcasts or writing, when I have some free time. So that's kind of, yeah, I guess what I kind of do in a nutshell.
Wow, that's so much. Congratulations on finishing your master's.
Thank you.
So what inspired you to become a feminist advocate and go down this route?
Yeah, so like when I think about it, I think like when I kind of look back, I think I've kind of always been a feminist, like even when I was a child. I always tell the story of like, I was 9 years old, and my brother was 12, and he was going from like primary school into secondary school, and I remember they were doing like an open day for his school, and I was obviously tagging along. And I remember saying to my mom, oh, I want to go to the school, and she was like, oh, you can't go, it's a boys' school. And I remember, I was a smart 9 year old, but I just like did not comprehend. I was just like, that makes no sense to me. Like, why can't I just like go to the school? And even now I'm just like, why are schools separated, like boys and girls? There's kind of all these like kind of moments like that. And even I think like, in my household itself, like I was raised in a very feminist household. Like even, our generation, like, was still, quite young, but even back then it was still like my mom, it was like not normal that she worked, or like a lot of my friends, their moms didn't work outside the home, and like the dad would have been the main one working. So even things like that, I was kind of, and like my dad was like the cook in our house, and so always kind of raised in a very feminist house from day one. And yeah, and then kind of just throughout the years, like I got involved in feminist society in college, and then kind of around that time as well, Ireland was fighting for abortion rights, so that we were kind of all involved in that. So that was kind of the back in 2018, and that was kind of like the main, yeah, kind of thing that we were all fighting for. And then yeah, when that was over, it was kind of like, oh well, what do we all do now? Like, what's the next thing? And yeah, so quickly, kind of shortly after that, I was like, I need something of my own. And also I wanted to have something that I could put on my CV, because like, prior to that, like all of my kind of academic, qualifications or whatever were in law, and my work experience was in law and politics, but I wanted to move into like the gender sphere. So I was like, let me kind of start a platform of my own. So yeah, I started making videos, started writing, started doing events back in 2019. And so yeah, and that's kind of the journey, I suppose. But I think, yeah, what it comes down to is like, I think I always was very like annoyed when I see like double standards. I think that when I kind of go to the crux of why I'm so passionate about feminism, it's just like the double standards thing. It's like, that makes no sense. Like, why can a boy do that but a girl can't, or why can a girl do that but a boy can't? And so then that's what it comes down to. It just makes no sense. And again, talking about kind of, what inspires you to be a feminist advocate, honestly, it's just like selfishness. Like, I'm like, I want to make the world a better place for me. Like, I hate when I walk down the street and I'm catcalled, or like that can be annoying. So like, I want to actively fight to make the world a better place for me. And then obviously it helps that in turn, I would hope that that makes the world a better place for everyone else as well. So that's kind of, yeah, the kind of the journey as to, yeah, why I'm here now doing this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that's such an interesting journey. I think it's so important when you're raised in such a welcoming and environment that fosters feminist ideas and equality. That's so interesting. So, moving towards your YouTube channel specifically, you cover a lot of taboo subjects, or taboo, what people would think are taboo. Stuff people really don't talk about. So, what are the most common feminine taboo topics that you've come across, and why do you think these topics aren't talked about that much?
Yeah. So like, obviously there's so many things. It's insane. Every facet of our lives is just like, oh, can't talk about that. But I think like some of the main things that I'm quite passionate about, like one is periods. Like I feel like my whole life revolves around my cycle. So I'm it's very present in my mind. And I'm just like, why is everyone so awkward about this thing that, like, as
Yeah.
we all know, like 50% of the world gets? And like, for me, I think like it's, obviously people think, it's connected to like, down there, and people get awkward and you can't talk about
Mhm.
anything or anything. And obviously there's so many, you know, back in the day, like references in like religious texts, like being impure and unclean and all this stuff. And I'm just like, what is happening? And I think what annoys me so much about periods being this stigmatized thing is like, we praise so much like motherhood and having babies and like a mother's job being this thing, but then we stigmatize the very bodily function that allows to have children, like the period. Like I'm very passionate about like if the period, if you don't have a period, like you just can't have children, you know what I mean? And like I'm like, particularly when men, you know, give out about it, or men are, you know, mocking us or whatever, I'm like, you wouldn't be here if it weren't for the period. So sit down. So that I'm just very passionate about that. And like, even, you know, it's a funny one. I remember this was just a few weeks ago, but like, you know, me and my mom would always, I'm very open. I talk about my period, talk about my cycle, my cramps, everything. And I remember a few weeks ago, we were kind of at doing a family barbecue, and my mom was like, "Oh, your skin is really nice, Lauren." And your skin is kind of glowing. And I replied with, "Oh yeah, I've just finished my period. That's why." Because when I finish my period, I get a very, like, it's very noticeable glow.
Yeah.
And like, we, you know, my mom would always talk about periods, not awkward at all. But I think because like my dad and my brother were there, she got a little bit awkward, and she'd be like, "Oh God, we all need to be hearing about that, do we?" Like not. And I was like, that's so funny, because if they weren't there, she probably would just be like, "Oh, interesting," you know. But because like the men were there, she maybe got a little bit awkward, and I was just like, "No, like we should be awkward. This should be a very normal thing." And like that was the reason why my skin was glowing. So I was like, I'll just say why the reason is, you know. So periods is kind of, it's what, and again, because it's such a present part in so many of our lives. That's why I'm just so passionate about that one. And then kind of another one that's like, I guess like like taboo, and like sometimes it's a funny word, but I honestly, I think like I would say that like sexual violence is taboo. Like people get awkward when you talk about it. Like people get awkward if you say things like, "Oh, I was sexually assaulted," or whatever, or like. And I think it's a funny one, because I think a lot of it is like people just don't know what to say. Like people like, "Well, do you want comfort?" And they're like, "I don't know how to give you comfort," or they maybe don't believe you, but they know enough not to say that they don't believe you, so they're kind of just holding back in awkward silence. And yeah, I think it's a funny one, because again, you know, kind of I'm big on like language, and like if I was to say, "Oh yeah, I was groped in a nightclub," like people would be like, "Oh," or like, you know, a guy grabbed my ass in a nightclub, people would be like, "Oh my God, that's terrible, that's horrendous." But then if I say like, "Oh, I was sexually assaulted in a nightclub," people would be like, "Oh, what?" Like that's it would be like silent. So I think that's a funny one. And again, you know, when these things are so prevalent, it's just like almost like fair enough if you're awkward about something that like doesn't happen that often, or is maybe not known very well. But it's like things like periods and sexual violence that happen every single day to everyone, like basically every woman. How could that be awkward? How can there be weirdness and like taboo and stigma? So they're kind of the two things that are just always on. And again, like, yes, you know, catcalling and just things that happen every single day. So yeah, they're kind of things that are very much on my mind, and that are just like, why are we awkward about these things? It makes no sense.
Yeah, that's so true. I think being awkward about it kind of stops women from speaking up about it, which is like part of the problem. Definitely need to speak up about this, and kind of, how do you think we can break the silence and openly discuss these taboo topics that contribute to, you know, women's empowerment and societal progress?
Yeah, so it's a funny one, because it's like this isn't a problem that like we made, but like women are forced to like fix the problem that like men made. So I'm always very conscious of like saying that, like, you know, women need to speak up, because it's like we've been speaking up and we've been silent. So, you know, I'm always just very conscious of that. But like, yeah, I think like for me anyway, I just try and like just like talk about the issues, and like even just kind of plant seeds. Like everyone's on their own journey of like kind of consciousness and like realization that like we live in an unfair like gendered world. And so I just try and plant seeds and get people thinking and get people like questioning. Like, you know, I think back to, again, like kind of when I was a child, like I was always that child that was like, "But why?" You know, "But why?" Like that annoying child that was like, "Give me a good answer." And so I think, yeah, just kind of planting seeds and getting people just being like, "Oh, well, that's actually kind of funny. Like, why was I treated differently, but, you know, my male colleague or my brother or whatever wasn't?" And I think it's just like, you know, for so long, again, as we all know, like these things have been normalized. Like, you know, or we've been told that like, "Oh, that's, you know, your ass being grabbed in a club is normal," or, you know, a guy wolf whistling at you down the street, that's normal. And like, I think, again, we all internalize that. So I think, again, just talking about things and like, yeah, kind of raising that consciousness, just, yeah, makes women know that like they actually don't have to put up with that stuff, and they actually can speak up, obviously if it's, you know, safe, which a lot of times it's not. But I think, yeah, it's just like, okay, they can see, okay, well, this is one woman who's fighting back against that thing. So maybe I can, learn from her and do the same, and not have to put up with that. So yeah, it's just, yeah, kind of raising that consciousness, planting those seeds, and just getting people thinking. And again, everyone's on their own journey. So I try and always just be gentle. But I think, and like, I'm just one person, and you're just one person. Like, we're not going to solve gender equality, overnight. But I think just yeah, continuing having the conversations and just doing the part that we can is really all we can do. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to hop on the Barbie bandwagon, but I think Barbie and Ken depicted it so well in the movie. If you watched it, it's like the way they both experience as soon as they go into the real world is how Ken feels empowered and Barbie feels self-conscious and like she's got eyes on her all the time. And I think that's exactly how it is in real life is men don't really understand what women go through when it comes to exposure in the real world and just living. So I
Yeah.
just speaking up about it is something so important so that everyone can understand what they're going through. And more on the like taboo subjects, how can we do more to create a safe space for men and women to learn more about these subjects, because they're not spoken about. You're not taught about periods that much in school. You're just taught about the biological processes and that's it. So what do you think can be done to learn more about these topics?
Yeah, so I was kind of thinking about this, and like, I'm very much in the kind of digital communication sphere, and like I, make videos or whatever. And
Mhm.
one thing that I am seeing lately that I think is really effective, which is actually something that I don't do, like what when I've made videos in the past, like I very much have just me talking to the camera, which is not bad. But one thing I've seen, one format that I think is really, really helpful for this kind of thing is when it's like, say, like two characters in a video, like having a conversation, or it's maybe just one person but pretending to be two people,
Yeah.
and having a conversation, like one's asking questions and one's responding. And I think it's
Mhm.
much less like direct. It's more like the person watching, I think, is much less likely to feel attacked. And it's like, it's annoying that we even have to think about the person being attacked. This is like, it's not about you, this is about us. But in the long run, you do have to think about how you're getting the message across, and how, are people feeling attacked, and if they are, they're probably not going to engage. So that kind of format of like just watching a video of two people going back and forth, I think is a really, really good way
Mhm.
of getting people to engage, and kind of they can kind of just be a bit of a bystander, like watching and learning from that video. So that's, I think, is really, really effective. Also just like kind of one thing that I do is I really try to like just learn by like osmosis. That like really makes no sense that I've just said that, but I follow a lot of on all my social media channels, like I follow a lot of just like feminist pages, and I always just encourage people who are maybe new to feminism and new to any kind of social justice, really, to like follow some pages. And like, you don't have to be like, a social justice warrior overnight, but like just follow some pages, and like, as you're scrolling, like you just see kind of one feminist post, and again, you might just plant a seed or learn something. And again, it's not like someone kind of, talking at you, or, being whatever, but you're kind of just seeing a post and you're like, okay, plant a seed, learn something, and yeah, and keep scrolling. I think that's kind of a nice, easy kind of way into this world.
Yeah.
And again, obviously, it can't be said enough that men listen to other men. I wish men listened to us, but that's a story for another day. But men really do listen to other men, and
Yeah.
so I just like, yeah, it's just like it just can't be said enough that like men need to use the privilege that they have and make feminist platforms. And again, like going back to kind of social media, like I'm following so many good men at the moment who are talking a lot about fair play in the home, and like sharing chores in the home and stuff. And I'm just like, oh my god, I watch their videos, and I'm like, they have so much power, and I'm so happy they're using it. And like, I
Yeah.
just know, like, a man watching their video is gonna listen 10 times more than if it was a woman saying the same thing. And so
Yeah.
that really just can't be stated enough. And I think, yeah, I think ultimately for me, what it comes down to in terms of, yeah, kind of, quote unquote, creating a safe space is like acknowledging that ultimately patriarchy hurts all of us. I find that is a really useful tool that I've used. And like, I'll give an example, like a few months ago, I was at kind of like a kind of an event with a few different people, and there was this guy, and he learned that I'm in feminist world, and kind of
Mhm.
straight away they want to kind of have this back and forth, and you can just see the kind of like the wheels turning in their head.
Yeah.
And he went straight for, oh well, men die earlier than women, so therefore you can't be feminist or whatever. And I was just like, well, that's patriarchy's fault.
Yeah.
you know, and I just shut him down straight away. I was like, yeah, I'm fighting for that too. Yeah, I think, there should probably be like an even, lifespan for
Yeah.
men and women and everyone. Like I'm all like, again, that's patriarchy's fault. That's not
Hmm.
women's fault, patriarchy's fault.
Yeah.
And I could just see kind of like, again, the wheels turning, like, oh right. I think that kind of acknowledging that, like, for the most part, we are on the same side, and that we're
Yeah.
not fighting each other, but we're fighting patriarchy, which does hurt
Hmm.
all of us. So I think that's a really, again, just something I've seen in my own life, and just talking one-on-one to people or whatever, I just found is a really good way of getting people on board. And again, just kind of, again, taking away that kind of, again, I do love to accuse men of a lot of things. Sometimes you're like, I just actually would rather like sit back and just kind of like not have a fight today. So I think kind of acknowledging that, like, for a lot of times we are on the same side, and let's focus on that instead of each other. So yeah, they're kind of a few things that I think help in the cause.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. Kind of bringing men into the cause is trying to make them
Yeah.
understand that we're on the same side. We're not on opposing sides. And
Yeah.
kind of on that, people get very negative or critical when they hear the word feminism. They don't really see it as like equality, they see it as women trying to get above men. And I guess mostly men don't really respond well to that. So how do you handle criticism or pushback as a feminist advocate and a YouTuber? You're, in the limelight. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so I think it's a funny one, like online, like, and particularly on YouTube, like because I like kind of, I suppose, have this like insecurity or think so like lowly, if that's even a word, of the stuff that I put out there. Like when I do see comments in my head, I'm like, oh, they're bots, they're fake.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, it would almost be like a compliment to have real humans watching my stuff. So in my head's like, no, that has to be a bot. That has to be a fake person. So
Yeah.
that actually really helps in a weird way. It's like my brain's trying to protect me or something. Because I'm like, oh, well, if it's a bot, then it can't be a real person. So it's fine.
Yeah.
And to be fair, like they leave horrendous comments. But I'm just like, oh, well, it's a fake person, so it's fine. But it's definitely a real person. My brain is just like not computing.
Yeah.
That it kind of just doesn't really penetrate a lot of the time. But I think as the years have gone on and I've gotten older and kind of stronger and more resolute, like I'm very good with, I think probably boundaries is the good word, like, or just being like, or like protecting my peace, or being like, I actually don't have to respond to you today. I think at the beginning,
Yeah.
I felt like a bad feminist for like not replying to each comment or like not fighting back, or even like if someone's in my Instagram DMs or whatever, I
Mm.
would be having it out and I would be so exhausted. I would be so mentally drained. And I think I saw a kind of a couple people online saying that, like, you actually don't have to respond. Like it's actually
Yeah.
your, like, I could turn off the comments if I wanted to. Again, that doesn't make me any less of feminist. Like I feel like I'm doing what I can do and what keeps me sane. And like I actually don't have to respond to people's comments if I don't want to. So I think that's really important for people to know. And I think also, again, something else I've seen online is like when men are like debating you on something, like for them it's an intellectual exercise. Like they're like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm just playing devil's advocate, or I'm just, okay, let's just think of this. And I'm like, well, I've been thinking about this for 30 years now, so I actually don't need to have it out with you today.
Yeah.
And whereas like for us, it's not an intellectual exercise. It's we're talking about our identity and like our rights as a human, and like it's very
Yeah.
draining. It's very like it's like we are in this 24/7. So I think that also really helps. Like like men will say, oh, why aren't you fighting back today? And it's like, oh, you obviously don't have the answers. It's like, no, I do, but I actually don't owe them to you. And I
Yeah.
think that, like, sometimes you have to just admit that like someone's a lost cause, or like, I think putting your energy where it's going to have the most impact. Like if there's one guy in my DMs who I know is just like insane, for lack of a better word, like I'm not going to fix him. Like
Yeah.
maybe I will, but like I need to protect my peace. So I'm actually very good with that, with acknowledging that and not feeling bad about it. And like, don't get me wrong, like, when I see comments and everything, like my stomach does drop, but I'm
Mm.
just kind of like, la 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 la. Like I just kind of
Yeah.
ignore it for the most part, honestly. And I'm doing what I can. And I feel good, So yeah, it's just kind of like, yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of, it definitely is a tough one, but I'm just like, you're allowed to do whatever you want. And yeah, and be happy with it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely such a good mindset to have, is kind of like tune out the haters, keep your peace, protect my
Yeah,
peace. Yeah, so
100%.
I'm going to your YouTube channel. You speak about a variety of topics. But in your opinion, what do you think is the most pressing feminist issue today?
Yeah, so my answer to this one is going to be annoying. Obviously I don't think there's just one, obviously. And, I think like there are so many different issues for so many different contexts. And obviously when I speak about this kind of thing, I'm very conscious that like I'm an extremely privileged white woman, you know, English speaking, you know, quote unquote Western world. And so like my problems are not that there's like a competition, but like I'm very conscious that like there are a lot of problems that I will never face in my life. So I think that to be conscious of that. But I think it's also an interesting one because, you know, like say like you might solve one problem, if one person is focusing on like one problem, like you kind of have to focus on them all simultaneously, or else it won't really matter. And like for, you know, I'll give an example, like if you're working on, you know, getting girls into education, like that's amazing. But then if girls, they don't have like pads or tampons or like clean hygiene facilities or whatever, like they may then can't go to school because they have their periods and they don't have enough, facilities for that. So I think we all do need to be working on all these things kind of simultaneously. But I think I suppose I'll speak for what I am really passionate about and what I just try and focus on the most, which is everyday sexism or casual sexism. And for me, and I'm so passionate about this, is because again, it's the one that again, as a very privileged woman, it's the one I experienced the most. So I suppose for anyone listening who maybe doesn't know what I mean by that, it's like it's these kind of, you know, again, quote unquote small things that happen every single day. It's, you know, it's sexist comments. It's things like, oh, boys wear blue and girls wear pink, or all this, silly stuff. Or, you know, it's catcalling on the street. It's, you know, it's just all these really small things that society has normalized and that aren't talked about enough. And like, it's amazing that people are out there talking about, like, you know, again, the quote unquote big issues, like, you know, rape and sexual violence and, you know, abortion rights and all this stuff. But I want there to be like as much energy on like these small things that I feel like make up like the bottom of like the pyramid almost. That like, it's like these are the things that we normalize in society. Then it's like, well, what do you normalize next? Like, well, if you normalize attitudes around like, oh, well, she was wearing a short skirt, you know, what should she expect? And then do you normalize, well, her being like attacked because you know, or she was again quote unquote drinking too much, or it's like when does that stop? So I'm just very passionate about kind of cutting it out at the source, like saying, okay, well, an attitude like that or a comment like that is not okay, and therefore the act is not okay. And like, it's just like all these things are connected. So I'm just very, very passionate about that. And again, I just think like, you know, again, I'm very conscious of like some people might say like, oh, that's a very privileged position to be in, but I think like all these things are as important as each other. Like work on the big things, work on the, again, quote unquote small things, and hopefully kind of attack these things from some angle in some, you know, in some way. But yeah, that's just one thing that I think really needs more attention on, and that I think could be just really beneficial for society. Yeah,
I think I agree. I think, you know, the small, quote unquote, small issues are as important as the big issues. I think it's just so sad. There's so many problems and things that women goes through is that you can't pinpoint it to one thing. But yeah, so finally, my last question is, what are the future goals that you have and aspirations as a feminist speaker and writer? How do you envision your work contributing to a more equitable and just world for women all around?
So I think really just like growing, you know, I've been doing this for a couple of years now, but you still get scared about like new ventures or new things. So I think just continuing to kind of grow my platform, and I think like learning more about myself and how I like to show up in the feminist world. Like some people are really all about like collaborations and doing things or whatever, and I find that I'm actually very like a solitary person. I'm very like, oh, I'll just do this on my own, and kind of being okay with that, you know, and just knowing, like learning more about how best I show up and how useful I am, again learning my energy levels and like what I have capacity for and all that. But I think just kind of continuing to grow that, and speaking more. And I would love to, honestly, one thing I would love to do is I would love to move to New York, and I would love to kind of just be, I think there's so much like a feminist culture there and a feminist world there, and I would love to be there. And this is me kind of speaking that into existence in a way. But that's kind of a plan, I think, that I would love to do. And I think again, just honing in on what I really believe in. And again, just I think a lot of that comes with age as well, is just being more confident in your opinions. And actually, one thing that I forgot to say, you know, going back to the question on how do you fight back you know, negative feedback or whatever, is actually, you know, when you are confident in what you're saying, negative feedback doesn't really affect you as much. And this is something that I very much like, I try not to speak about things that I don't know anything about, because then if someone does come back and questions me, I might not be able to answer them, and then I feel like shit, and I'm like, oh God, I'm actually doing a disservice to the feminist community. So yeah, I think like actually just always being really not to like stop you from speaking about things just because you're not an expert on it, because obviously we should all be allowed to like voice, you know, stuff and amplify stuff. But I think get more resolute in my opinions and just continue learning so much more, so that I can continue to give out more to society. And again, just kind of build up my like armor, which is unfortunate that we get to like do that, but again, this is the world we live in. So yeah, just kind of continuing to grow and continuing to just speak about these things. And again, just planting seeds. I think like I think maybe when I was younger, I would have wanted gender equality overnight. But I think again, as you get older, you just become a bit more like, not realistic in a bad way, but like realistic in a way that, you know, again, protects your peace. You know, doesn't, you can sleep at night, you know, knowing that, okay, I'm doing what I can. You know, there are plenty of people who are doing nothing at all. So, you know, I'm doing what I can with my, you know, capacity and my, you know, and again, I think just again, using the privilege that you have. Like, I think it's just like, I'm like, the reason that I can do what I do is because of, you know, not to be cliche about it, but all the women who came before me, you know. And so it's like the least I can do to just like try and fight for this in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, just continuing the fight, and just continuing reaching more people, and, you know, using more avenues to reach people, and yeah, again, just planting those seeds and creating conversations, and just kind of getting people to just think like, oh, what, you know, it could be different in some way, and hopefully that kind of radicalizes them and changes the world, you know, one person at a time. So
Yeah, that sounds great. I think you're doing such great work, and I personally can't wait to see what you have in store for the future. I think personally, a problem with me is I want to attack everything and I want to solve everything at once, that I have to kind of say, no, I need to do it one step at a time and kind of, you know, put things into perspective. But thank you so much for your time today. And thank you for the wonderful conversations. I'm sure everyone else enjoyed it as much as I did, but thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me on. Honestly, your podcast is wonderful. I've listened to a few episodes already, so yeah, I'm just excited to hear more. And yeah, you know, we're all just doing what we can, and I think that we always need to be nice to ourselves and just give ourselves a break. And yeah, we can sleep at night, but we can also just kind of fight the patriarchy.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.